Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be making a meta tier list for the Paladins Tidal Surge update, because quite a few balance changes have happened since the last tier list, and so, well, it's time to make a new one. And before we get started, I of course want to give a few disclaimers and also explain how the tier list works. First of all, it's important to remember that this is just my opinion. It's an opinion-based tier list on the internet, so don't take it too seriously. There's always a few people in the comments section who are really salty and venomous and triggered by the placements on the tier list. It's not that serious, and you're entitled to have a different opinion. In fact, I encourage you to go into the comments section down below and critique my tier list. Say what you agree with, say what you disagree with, because I'm always happy to hear your thoughts. And hey, sometimes I learn a thing or two about how my own opinions might have been wrong. Second, let's talk about the actual structure of the tier list and how I'm deciding the rankings for every single character. So first of all, we have 5 different tiers on this tier list. We have the D tier, which is for champions that are generally irrelevant in the meta. They're just bad picks, don't play them, and yeah, nothing more to say. Next up we have the C tier, which is always the most complicated tier on my tier list, because I like to inject a bit of nuance into how I do my tier lists. The C tier is for champions that would otherwise be A or S tier, but they are extremely niche, and so you can only play them in a handful of circumstances. You either need a specific team comp on your team or the enemy team, or you need a specific map in order to make these champions work. So they're very, very, very strong. Don't get it twisted. You just need to have a few more things going your way to actually make them work properly. You can't just inject them into any team comp. Then we have the B tier. This is for champions that are rather average. They're solid picks, but they're certainly not all-stars in any sort of way. And then we move on to the A tier. These are champions that are overall above average. They are very good right now, and you can't really go wrong if you pick them and you know what you're doing. Lastly, we have the S tier. This is for champions that are extremely good right now, top of the meta, probably deserving of some kind of nerf, whether it be a small tweak or some major balance changes. So yeah, these are ban and pick priority. Now, another thing to keep in mind with this tier list is that I'm coming at it from the perspective of someone who has been a multiple-time master. I reached Grandmaster in Season 6, so I am a long-time player. I have a lot of experience in this game, and also I like to use the data to supplement my choices. They don't always line up with the exact win rates and pick rates and ban rates of every champion, but they do influence where I put the champions on the tier list to some degree. So when it's relevant, I'll be putting up the pick rate, ban rate, and win rate data of the champion I'm talking about on the screen. So lastly, it's important to talk about the ordering of the champions in the tier list, because there is a specific order that you need to remember. So I have them grouped up by class first. So I have tanks, then flanks, then damage champions, then supports. Bear that in mind, because if a tank is listed as higher up than a support, that doesn't mean the tank is necessarily better than the support. So if I have Nyx ahead of Maldamba, well, that doesn't mean Nyx is better than Maldamba. However, the order within each class does matter. So if I have Nyx ahead of Khan, that means Nyx is better than Khan. Got it? Good. But yeah, before we get started, why don't you check down below and make sure that you're subscribed, because over half the people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, and I'd really appreciate it if you would join the club. But yeah, let's talk about the D tier up first, which is the tier for champions that, well, they suck. Do not play these champions in ranked, they are bad. And this tier remains mostly the same from the previous tier list, however a few champions have moved out of it, and one champion has moved back into this tier. Let's talk about that champion up first. Genos is back in the D tier. He went from the D tier to the C tier, back down to the D tier in terms of my Season 7 tier list. So, in the last tier list, I did move him up to C tier because I made the assumption that the new cards he got, that gave him a movement speed buff and a shield on his Astromark, I assumed that those would give him a niche role in the meta where he might be good as sort of a pocket champion, maybe as like a binary star sort of off-support sort of thing. But that hasn't really panned out, and Genos remains one of the worst, if not the worst, supports in the entire game. His win rate is in the toilet, his pick rate is even more in the toilet, and people just aren't playing this guy seriously at all. So Genos is our new, returning champion in the D tier. However, everyone else remains the same. So Saris is in the D tier, and this might be a little surprising considering that she did get 2 talent reworks that were meant to make her better, but ultimately people just have not been playing this champion at all. I've rarely seen her in ranked, and when I have, she has lost. Her win rate has remained the lowest in the support category at high elo, and it seems that Forsake, well, it was supposed to make her good at high elo and good at late game, but it just hasn't succeeded. Honestly, I think the best way to play this champion is still to play Soul Collector as a sort of off-support playstyle, but generally, that's still just not something you really want to see at a high level of gameplay, so Seris remains in the D tier. Then we have Strix, who is the only sniper in D tier. You'll notice his pal Kinessa is missing, that's because she got a massive rework. So Strix, yeah, he's still in the gutter. He got one nice FOV change for his scope that makes it a bit easier to use, but he's still generally a very bad damage champion, one of the worst performing in the game, and so he belongs in D tier next to Betty, who similarly is a very low performing damage champion. She is the worst blaster in the game, thanks to a whole slew of nerfs that she's gotten over the past few years, and so there's not really much of a reason to play her outside of, maybe you want to play her on Ice Mines, assuming that Dredge and the other good blasters are already banned, but that's just a super niche situation, and she's generally bad. Then we have Kasumi and Seven, which are the only two flanks in D tier. You'll notice that Caspian is also gone, because he got some buffs. So Kasumi did also get some buffs alongside Caspian, but she's still not performing well at all. They were very good buffs, don't get me wrong, and in some cases she can be a surprisingly adept flank, but she still lacks a lot of the value that a lot of other flanks have, so she goes into the D tier. And then Seven, well, I almost had to make a new tier just for Seven, because they were about to put this man 6 feet under. Luckily, they didn't go through with those balance changes. If you know what those were. Oh, it was bad. And yeah, they just didn't do anything to him, so he remains in the D tier because he hasn't gotten a change for the better or for the worse. Next up, we have the C tier. Now remember, this is very important. The C tier is for champions that would otherwise be A tier or S tier. However, they are extremely niche, and you only want to play them when you have a specific setup on your team, a specific setup on the enemy team, or you're on a specific map that tends to really favor these champions. So let's talk about the supports up first. We have Corvus, Ray, and Grok. All three of these are fantastic supports. Fantastic. You just have specific situations for each. Grok is amazing in deathball comps, and he's also a good damage champion when you have a bunch of deployables and a bunch of grouped up enemies on the enemy team. But mostly he's played for Totemic Ward with a sort of deathball pirate style comp. So yeah, unless you have that, you really shouldn't be playing him, but if you do have that, there's not any champion that's better than Grok for that sort of niche, except maybe Moji right now because she's generally just OP. Then we have Ray. Ray is superb in double support. As a matter of fact, if you pair her with Grok, you actually have a really good team strategy there, if you can pull it off with, a bunch of other good champion synergies. She's really good with champions that have really good ults on her team, and she's also very good on Bazaar. However, there are a lot of maps that she tends to struggle on, and she also tends to struggle as a solo healer without a wicked amount of skill, and even though we are assuming that you're good at the champion on this tier list, she's still just generally not your first choice when you're, I don't know, say solo healing on Timbermill. So she is also niche enough that I have her in the C tier, but don't get it twisted, she is actually one of the best supports in the game. Then we have Corvus, last but not least, and Corvus is the pocket support. He's who you want to pick if you have a really good flank main on your team, and you're trying to do a sort of dive strat where you've got, like, I don't know, Azan and Droxus duoing up, diving into the backline. A Corvus pocket is really good for that. Or you could do a Torvald plus Corvus pocket on a flank and just watch that flank win the game for you. But if you don't have that, then, well, you don't really want to pick Corvus, so he's niche, goes into C tier. Next up, we have the only damage champion, which is Dredge. Dredge is an excellent blaster, and he is, in fact, one of the most banned champions, specifically on Ice Mines. He is the Ice Mines champion. You play him on that map, or you don't really play him at all. There are a few other maps where he can be okay, like maybe Jag Falls sort of thing with those tight hallways, but he's mostly just relegated to Ice Mines and other really grouped up maps. Next, we have Buck. Buck is all in on the dive. He is all or nothing. He's either the best champion in the game or he's the worst champion in the game, depending on if the enemies are going to allow him to dive. So ideally, you want to play Buck against champions that are easy to dive, like Victor, and stay away from champions like Ray, Torvald, Atlas, etc. And if you can get away with Buck, then, oh man, yeah, he is S tier when he's strong. But if you play him in a situation where you have those anti-dive champions, there are honestly fewer champions that are worse than Buck. Like, he's really, really dynamic in terms of that. And also, you ideally want to play him with a comp that can play around his super divey playstyle, right? Torvald plus Buck is an excellent combo, because Torvald can pocket the Buck as he goes in. Or you could play Buck with someone like Azan or another excellent dive tank, and you can get a lot of kills that way. You just gotta play him in the right situation. Then we have 3 tanks here, and what the heck is Torvald doing here? Oh my god, why is Torvald down here in C? Isn't he S tier? Well, yeah, he is S tier. He's just also niche. I've come to decide that he is a more nuanced champion now, after he's gotten a few nerfs, you know, to the protection, to his damage, all that sort of stuff over the year, and yeah, I've decided that he is still very, very good. You want to pick Torvald and pocket Androxus, and that Androxus is really good and you just want to win the game? Yeah, that still works. That's fantastic. He's also still got excellent capabilities for anti-dive, right? His Nullify is still amazing. He still forces out a lot of items from the enemies, but I think the nerfs have hit him hard enough that you have to be a bit more careful with when you pick Torvald. He struggles to go toe-to-toe against a lot of other tanks now because of that damage nerf, and well, I mean, he can still put up a huge fight, and he is also, you know, obviously a direct counter to Rom because of his personal shield and his Nullify, yada yada. But yeah, you just have to be a bit more cautious now, I think. And so pick him when you have someone who is really good that you can pocket, or pick him to specifically counter a champion like Eevee. Torvald is excellent against Eevee. And yeah, you'll do just fine, but there are some champions that you just don't really want to pick Torvald against, like Kinessa, for example. What are you going to do against Kinessa? She's going to blast your head off from a mile away, and yeah, Torvald's not that good there. And also his ultimate is fantastic, but it is also a little bit more map dependent because some maps really favor throwing someone off the map. But other maps, you can't do that at all. So, yeah, he is very good. Very, very, very good. Just gotta be a little bit more careful with how you pick him now. But then Rom and Yagoroth, not much has changed in that department. Yagoroth is super niche. You have to play her when there aren't very many counters. She's also more favorable on certain maps where you can abuse walls to ult people and basically get that for free without dying. And yeah, you also have to be very skillful at her too. There are only a select few people I can think of that can actually make this champion work. Because she's so unique, she requires a very different skill set to what most champions normally do. And then Rom, I was debating whether or not to move him up to maybe like B tier, but I've decided that he's still a very niche champion. He's a lot stronger now thanks to the Rejuvenate change because he can increase his self-healing, and that together with Subservience is good. But Subservience also dictates that you have to have relatively high health champions to get the most out of the percent-based healing. And if you don't have super high health champions, like let's say you have Barrack on your team and then a bunch of like squishy champions like, I don't know, Eevee, Subservience is going to be proportionally worse. And also, he still has all the same counters that he's had since his inception. He gets countered by percent damage, he gets countered by high flat damage, he gets countered by most CC in the game, and so you have to pick him very specifically. You don't just want to pick him recklessly versus Cassie and Tyra on the opposing team, for example. That just won't cut it. So he's very good now. He has been buffed tremendously, but yeah, just due to the nature of how the character works, you still have to be careful with how you pick him. Now let's talk about the B tier. B is for balance. These champions are generally pretty solid picks. And, well, you'll notice it is a tiny bit more bloated, and also a few champions have switched around. So let's talk about the supports up first, Grover and Lilith. Grover is teetering on the edge of D tier, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I checked his win rate and his ban rate and all of that, and it's not very good. So, very bottom of B tier for sure. The nerfs hit him hard. I think the only reason I'm not moving him lower is just because A, it hurts me personally to do it, because I really like him. But also I do think he still brings some things to the table. He brings very powerful self-sustain, which got buffed thanks to the Rejuvenate change. He's allowed to, for the first time ever, increase the healing he does to himself, just passively at all times. And also he's still able to do a lot of damage while healing at the same time. So he's a very good hybrid champion, and Vine Tech is still in the game, bringing him excellent survivability. So, not quite D-tier scum, but, I mean, if they nerf Blossom again, for some reason, yeah, he'd probably end up going in D-tier. Then we have Lilith. She got kind of just weird, like, almost a soft rework, but not really, and ultimately it just ended up being a lot of net nerfs, and so she used to be really strong, but I don't think she's quite as strong anymore. Can still be powerful in the right situation, but generally, she's just an okay support right now. She's existing, she's vibing, she's not really special at the moment. Then we have a whole bunch of damage champions. Ah! So let's start with Tiberius. He's at the very bottom here. He got some love in the recent patch. He now has a new damage reduction perk on Vicious Assault. His leap is acting faster, right? You're able to get in the air quicker. And he also got a brand new talent, but he's still generally just mid. He is fine, I guess, if you know how to play him, but there are a lot of champions that outshine him in one way or another. His sword at base is still really clunky, which leads a lot of people to still want to play the Explodey sword talent. And yeah, he's very okay. So, bottom of B tier he goes. Then we have Shaolin. Now, in the last tier list, I made a mistake of putting Shaolin higher than Amani. I don't think that's actually accurate, and to be honest, it was kind of just an oversight. I wasn't really thinking about those champions that very much, so I kind of just left them where they were. But yeah, Shaolin is, I would say, worse than Amani at the current state in the game because he gets a lot more impacted by armor plating. And even though armor plating has taken multiple hits throughout the season, it still really hurts Shaolin, and he also it kind of is only good versus like half the roster. He's really good against flanks, and he has good matchups, varying levels of good against damage champions, but he can still get absolutely ran over by tanks. And, well, most tanks in the game are really good. So Shaolin, yeah, he's kind of there. He's still competent, but there are a lot better choices than him. And Imani, I think she's better because even though Inferno Cannon has its own problems, it does have one very major benefit. Its ability damage. So armor plating damage reduction just completely doesn't work against it. And of course she has that very powerful AoE root. And ever since the dragon got fixed to no longer have fall off, it's actually been a pretty serious winning tool for Imani. Like, she can get some crazy amounts of kills with that. It's a very serious threat now. So that put her slightly higher into B tier. I still don't think she's A tier material, and her stats, I think, reflect that. But if you're good at Imani, she is very good. Then we have Vivian and Octavia. Now, these two champions were in A tier on my previous tier list, and they are still very strong if you plug in the controller and you just want to do a bunch of damage. However, people just don't like playing these champions. Their pick rates are awful, and, I mean, they were kind of also the same in terms of, like, my previous tier list. When I had them in A tier, the pick rates were still kind of bad. But, you know, I still considered them to be reasonably good. But I just can't bring myself to keep them in that tier anymore, considering how much people don't like playing them. I think they're still, on paper, very strong. They're just boring and clunky, and so I'm just going to put them in B tier, because people don't like them. So, yeah, if you think that assessment is incorrect, let me know in the comment section down below, but yeah, they're just bleh. Then we have Victor and Omen, the final two damage champions here. Victor is all around pretty solid if you plug in the controller and you do a lot of damage, but he is very weak to being Dove, so he doesn't go any higher than B. But if you want to pump out a lot of damage, he is very good in that department, and he's less clunky and more favorable in the eyes of the controller players than Octavia and Vivian, apparently. Slightly less boring, so there you go. And then Omen, now I was actually, like, I was debating putting him in D tier, just from my own personal anecdotes of seeing absolutely zero good Omen players this patch. I have not run into a single Omen player that has impressed me, that has done good. In fact, I don't even think I've run into an Omen player that's went positive. But the stats don't reflect that, and so I can't let my anecdotes get in the way of the objective evidence, and when you look at his actual stats, he is still performing perfectly fine. So I am going to leave him in B tier. My prediction in the previous tier list was that he would be in B tier, and the reason I say it's a prediction is because, well, at the time he had a bug that gave him pinpoint accuracy, and that bug would have put him up into like S or maybe A, and my prediction was that he would be maybe high B, low A, and I think that has ultimately kind of proven to be accurate to an extent. I've just been really unlucky with the Omen players that I have found. Now we have flanks, and we have one new addition to the roster in B tier, and that is Caspian. I think that the cripple buff has given him enough oomph to rise up out of the D tier. He's still not a super popular flank at the moment, but I think that he has enough going for him to be competent if you really know what you're doing. That might be a hot take, but I don't know. I felt like moving him up there. I mean, getting a cripple on your rogue's tempo is a very powerful ability, and I just feel like it's justified to put him up here. So low B tier he goes. Then we have Xin, Lex, Vora, and Maeve, the usual culprits down in B tier. Xin is the old reliable, but he's not super great at any specific type of flanking right now. He's, you know, consistent, he's good at surviving, he is very consistent in terms of his damage pressure as well, but he's not anything spectacular, so he goes in low B. Lex got a lot of nerfs, which make him the worst flank on controller compared to the other options of Koga, Skye, Talus, etc. But he is still perfectly competent. You can play Discovery, do a lot of damage, so he's fine. He's just not doing nearly as good as he once was. Vora is in low B tier because, surprisingly, even though she has a really ridiculously powerful damage reduction card right now, she still is, performing rather average at high elo. She's just, a very nice, well-designed flank. She's reasonably balanced, even though the damage reduction, in my opinion, is still a little bit too strong. She's, overall, doing okay. And the same can be said for Maeve generally. She's actually performing quite well. I think she had like a 60% win rate or something like that, which is pretty darn good. Maeve is one of those champions who is as good as the player. If you're skillful at her, she's going to pop off. If you're not, then, well, she's trash. And we're assuming the player is good at the characters, so low B, or a high B tier she goes, because, well, yeah, she's just good. She's very well balanced. Her talents still need a little bit of love, with particularly Street Justice, that rework being very underwhelming. But yeah, Cat Burglar is great. Rogue's Gambit can be very fun, although certainly not the meta option. And yeah, she's doing fine. Now, for the tanks, this is probably the most surprising thing when it comes to my B tier, because, well, there were 2 tanks in B tier last tier list, but they've completely switched. What? Why do we have Ashe and Barrick down here right now? Well, Barrick actually isn't doing too hot right now. He kind of loses matchups versus a lot of the other point tanks because, well, he's very squishy. He struggles against Inara, specifically when she's running Treacherous Ground. It's very annoying for him, but also with Mother's Grace, she just, doesn't take damage from Barrick. Nyx, very strong right now. Terminus, very strong right now, and both of them have favorable matchups against Barrick. And even Fernando. Fernando is also very good, and he has a reasonably favorable matchup against Barrick, because he can do area damage, destroy Barrick, and destroy the turrets at the same time, and he also has reasonably high damage output with his Scorch. So, Barrick, he's still perfectly capable, and that's why he's in B tier. And so yeah, if you want to play Barrick, absolutely, pop off. This shouldn't discourage you from playing him. He's still a very good tank. It's just that the other tanks are gooder, and so he goes into B. And the same is kind of true for Ashe. She is still, again, perfectly great. Great off-tank. But she also has some struggles in terms of matchups. Her shoulder bash is very telegraphed, and that can lead to it being countered by a multitude of tanks that have crowd control. Azan can stun her or knock her up. Makoa can hook her. Inara can Treacherous Ground. Atlas can rewind. Nyx can cripple. I think you get the point. And while she does have a lot of crowd control that also ignores Unbound, which is very nice, it's, also, it's like, okay. And a lot of movement abilities will just straight up counter knockbacks anyway, so it's not like the craziest thing in the world. And her damage output is very consistent, and with Slugshot she has some of the best range in the tank class, but it's also not like crazy high damage to write home about either. Her ultimate is very good, but crowd control also counters it, so she is a very good off-tank, and if you play her well, she is extremely valuable, and also her value goes way higher on maps like Ice Mines or Jaguar Falls, where she can play in tight corners where blast damage is really good. So don't get it twisted, these 2 tanks are excellent. They're just not as excellent as the other tanks. The tank class in general, you guys know how I feel about them, they are all really good. Now let's move on to the A tier. Now we do have a lot of stuff being shaken up here too. So let's start with the support class. We do have some familiar faces, but we do have a few new faces as well. Io is still at the bottom of A tier. She's perfectly capable, does quite a lot of healing output. She can have a lot of survivability with Sacrifice, or she can choose to give her teammates a really powerful pocket by going for the triple wombo combo of excellent healing on Moonlight, damage reduction from Goddess Blessing, and movement speed from Swift Arrows. So that's also very valuable. She's generally one of the tougher tougher supports to flank, because she can use Luna as a bodyguard, get a bunch of extra damage, she can stun the flank, so that's all well and good. Pip goes into A tier. He was previously in B tier. I've decided that I've seen enough good Mega Potion players to give him a firm spot in the A tier. I think it's reasonably comfortable. The only thing that really holds Pip back is A, the skill requirement, and B, the fact that he is very easy to farm by hit scan champions, because he still has one of the biggest heads in Paladins. So, that can hurt him a little bit, but Mega Potion has just been popping off recently. I've seen a lot of it, and it's generally done very good. And that's not to say you can't do good with his other playstyles either, and certainly Combat Medic is the preferred choice for less skilled Pip players, but in general, he's, a very solid support. Then we have Furia with Solar Blessing, and I guess maybe if you want to play Exterminate as a damage talent, I don't know. I just know it's all about the Solar Blessing. The beam is fantastic, one of the highest healing per second abilities in the game, and it also has a lot of the utility now that it didn't used to have back when it was much worse. You can have the lingering heal on allies, you can heal yourself with it, providing you excellent survivability. It's just a very, very good tool, and she still has one of the strongest ultimates in the game, giving her entire team a damage and movement speed boost, on top of having good damage herself, so she also sits comfortably in A tier. Now, what the heck is Ying doing here? Isn't she S tier? Well, kind of, but also kind of not. Surprisingly, she is the most banned support in the game still by a country mile, but her win rate doesn't really reflect the need for so many bans. She isn't winning as many games as you actually think she is. And because of that, I've decided that I'm going to balance it out and give her an A ranking, because she is very, very good. But in particular, right? Life Exchange got nerfed to 700, okay, that hurts her. But also with the new Rejuvenate, she can't really benefit from it, because it's bugged to not work on pets. So this also hurts Io as well, by the way, with Luna, but it also doesn't work on Ying illusions. So if you buy Rejuvenate with this character, you're only getting it for your right click and for your ultimate, which hinders her, because other supports can take full advantage of that. And so I think that is enough to move her down to the top of A, which is still a very excellent rating, still one of the strongest supports in the game, but I find that, yeah, I can't really justify putting her into low S. I can't really do it at this time. Now, let's talk about damage champions. Drogoz is still at the bottom of A tier. He is an excellent damage champion, one of the best in the game, especially when he's uncountered, right? You have to bring a counter to Drogoz, otherwise Drogoz will steamroll your lobby, because he has excellent damage, flight, you know the drill. But, of course, counters do hold him back. He can still do well against those counters sometimes if you're good at him. And a lot of the counters to Drogoz aren't really hard counters, they're more like soft counters. Tyra, for example. She technically counters Drogoz because she's a hit scan, she can apply the reveal to him, she's tanky. But a good Drogoz player can play around a Tyra, no problem. It's really just mostly like champions like Leon, Androxus, Sati, that you really have to worry about, and some tanks can also absorb his abilities too, like Terminus, for example. So, he goes low A, can't go much higher. If there were no Drogoz counters in the game, by golly, he'd be at the top of S tier, but that's not how this game works, so yeah. Now we have Sati. She's moved up from the B tier, and I've seen a lot of people playing her, and her anti-dive capabilities with the Window of Opportunity, and also, of course, the aggressive plays that you can do with it too, are very powerful. Of course, Window of Opportunity gets countered by Sentinel, not Unbound, and Unbound is significantly more popular, so that gives her an edge up, and she generally has very consistent, powerful hit scan damage, which is always nice, and she can also kill people through walls, so, you know, that's something too, I guess. Then we have Tyra, generally a very strong tank buster, very tanky right now with the Mercy Kill playstyle, which is the meta. I've seen a lot of people playing Burn Monster these days for some reason. That's not how you play the champion. You are shooting yourself in the foot, because people love to walk out of your fire, and by playing Burn Monster, you're forfeiting the option to have so much extra damage reduction, and also more bursts in the form of your grenades. So play Mercy Kill, don't play Burn Monster. But yeah, she is generally very competent. Then we have Leon. She was another champion who I had in low S tier on the last tier list. And just like Ying, she's not winning as many games as you'd think, and she's also not even the top banned champion in the damage class anymore. Not really by a long shot. So yeah, she's fallen off. She's still very good. But yeah, she is just not as good as she was at her prime. The nerfs did hit her pretty hard, getting multiple damage nerfs. So yeah, I think high A is a comfortable place for her right now. Now we have the two newbies here in terms of A tier, fresh from the lower ranks. We have Cassie and we have Kinessa, two champions that got giga buffed in the recent update. Let's start with Cassie because she's simpler. Cassie got percent base damage on her blast shot. Yeah. So this champion can poison enemies for quite a lot of their health if they're a tank, you know, do hundreds of extra damage per second on the blast shot now against tanks. It's an area of effect, so she can apply it to multiple people, and while it does have fall off, that still provides a lot of extra ultimate charge for Cassie, and it also provides utility in the form of a personal reveal. She can see them through walls because of the damage ticks ticking on their model. And she also is able to slow enemies with disengage, and her ultimate automatically refills her ammo, which are smaller buffs, but still important to note. And that has made her rise all the way up to A tier. Top of A tier, some people might even argue low S, but I think high A is a comfortable spot for her. She's very strong right now, and I would anticipate a nerf to the blast shot sometime in the next update, or maybe the update after that. Then we have Kinessa. She got a soft rework. Her sniper now works a lot differently. She got a talent rework. She got a lot of changes to her reposition transporter sort of thing, and in general, she's very strong right now because she has a much easier sniper rifle to use thanks to the FOV change and the charge rate, and the faster charge rate, even though she does less damage per shot now, that faster charge rate has given so much life to this character because she's now able to consistently deal damage rapidly throughout the match. She's able to hit follow-up shots a lot quicker now, which means she's bursting people down super fast. It also is sort of a buff to steady aim because if you charge your full shots faster, you get more consistency out of steady aim, and steady aim brings her back up to 1200 damage. And her ultimate also got a heck of a lot stronger, so that's another thing. You can burst people with her ultimate all day long. So she is another champion who is super popular. Some people, again, might argue a low S ranking, but I think low A, or a high A, is good for her. She still is not a perfect champion. She can still be dove very easily by certain champions, and certain maps are more favorable than others. She's excellent, literally dominant. Yeah, she probably is S tier on Frog Isle, for example, but on a map like Brightmarsh, not necessarily the case, but still very good right now because the buffs have just made her so strong. And again, I would probably anticipate some sort of tweak to make her a little bit more fair in the coming updates. Now we have the flanks. This hasn't changed. We have Talus, Eevee, and Androxus. 3 very strong flanks. Talus very good on controller, Eevee very good on keyboard and mouse, Androxus a little bit of both, and they're all very strong. Talus has actually been seeing quite a boost to his win rate recently for some reason. He didn't get changed at all, I guess. I don't know, more people are playing him and doing well with him. It kind of fluctuates, but he's always been very good on controller. Eevee, always been very good on keyboard and mouse, and Androxus, yeah, he's just solid. He's the most popular flank in the game. People love him, and people play him very well. So, all 3, very solid flanks, nothing more to say. Now we have the tanks. So Inara and Makoa, I've decided to move them both up to A tier because their performance recently has been pretty solid. Low A tier, mind you, but still I think they're pretty solid. Makoa got some buffs recently over the past few patches. The Harden buff, by the way, that's a card that he has that gives him damage reduction on his Dredge Anchor. That got a buff that I think got overlooked by a lot of people. It's very subtle, but it's actually very powerful. It got buffed a few patches ago to give him 4 seconds of duration on up to 25% damage reduction, which is actually pretty huge. And when you pair that with the changes he got recently to make his ultimate stronger, he does a lot more damage, he has a lot more health, he has headshot damage reduction. That all has made him a lot stronger, and the hook has always been one of the best abilities in Paladins, and if you can hit your hooks consistently, and you can make space with a Shell Shield, he is a very excellent off-tank. Not perfect, still has counters, you know, hit scans always will counter him, and he does have some poor matchups against other tanks like Rom, for example, but overall he is a very good off-tank, and Inara is a very potent point tank as well, or main tank. You still play her aggressively. They're all tanks. They all are supposed to make the front line, right? But Inara, very tanky, and also, of course, now her favorability with her increased healing on Earthen Guard has actually gone up because of the fact that Rejuvenate no longer counters Cauterize. So much fewer tanks have access to the ability to directly counter Cauterize. And because Inara has that, I think that's actually given her a little bit of a boost in terms of how people perceive her as a main tank. And also, of course, Treacherous Ground. Some people say it's trash, some people say it's great. I think that it can be a very useful tool in certain matchups to prevent certain champions from really enjoying their experience playing the game. And yeah, she's generally a very fine tank. Then we have Azan, Ruckus, Atlas. All 3 of them are superb off-tanks. Azan is kind of a jack of all trades. He's really good at a lot of things. He does very consistent damage. He has very good crowd control, very good survivability, and some of the best mobility in the tank class. Put that all together, you have an excellent off-tank. Not much more needs to be said. Ruckus, for some reason, I just can't play this guy right now. Like, I tried playing him a few times and I frickin' sucked. I guess I've just fallen off hard with this character. But that doesn't mean he's trash. He's actually quite the opposite, and people have been finding great success with Ruckus, one of the premier off-tanks right now. Great mobility, great damage, great ultimate, and yeah, the only thing he really lacks is survivability. He is one of the squishier tanks in the game, but that can be played around, and he's a big flank, right? He's like playing a flank, but with 2,000 extra hit points, so that is always very nice. And Atlas, if you are good at him, he is just mwah, he is so good. Forces Unbound out of the enemies, and even when they do have Unbound, he still has the ability to interrupt stuff, and his own abilities that don't get countered by Unbound are still phenomenal. He gets a second life with second chance, his wall is fantastic, blocks infinite amounts of damage, and if you play properly, you can have really good uptime on it too, and really good range. Range on a tank is always very powerful, because normally they want to get up close, so if they can poke you from afar while having all of their tanky abilities, that is very very strong. And then we have Fernando. Now, I might put him a little bit higher than some other people would on this tier list. Like, other people might put him maybe mid-A or maybe low-A instead. But I'm a huge Fernando believer, and I have played him so much this season, and he has always consistently been amazing. Scorch does a lot of damage because it's ability damage, so it ignores armor plating. And it also gives him insane amounts of ultimate charge. I was playing Fernando the other day on stream, and I was able to build my ultimate faster than a Tiberius on my team who was using the ultimate charge card at level 5. Because that's how good Scorch is if you play it smartly and you make sure to line people up to get consistent double, triple fireballs. And his ultimate is one of the best in the game. That, I think, carries him a lot in terms of his position in A tier here, because holy crap, man. You can make your entire team immortal. Do you know how good that is? You can block literally any ultimate in the game. It's freaking awesome. And, well, with Scorch, you can have very good uptime on that. So put 2 and 2 together. Oh, he's amazing. A lot of people will also play Aegis because it's a very powerful shield. Probably the most powerful shield in the game right now when you stack it with Guardian. I don't personally like that passive sort of playstyle, but I can't deny people have found good success with that as well. And it can make him a very powerful, beefy main tank. So, Fernando is very strong. Now, let's talk about the S-tier champions. This has been shaken up a little bit. So, let's talk about our supports up first. Maldamba's in S-tier. Huh? When did this happen? Wasn't he, like, really bad a year ago? Isn't he supposed to be, like, the pinnacle of balance? Isn't he supposed to be, like, always just in the middle, perfectly capable, good if you're good at him, bad if you're bad at him, not supposed to be the strongest support? Well, yeah, that's changed. Times have changed. The accumulation of buffs over the past year or two have finally caught up to this champion and made him honestly the most popular support in ranked right now. He has an incredible win rate, he has the highest pick rate out of any support by quite a lot, and his ban rate is quickly catching up to Ying. Every time I look, it's edging closer and closer to Ying's ban rate, like they're kind of switching places. This guy is everywhere if you play high elo ranked. If you watch my ranked streams over on the VODs channel or over on my Twitch channel, yeah, I mean, it's rare to find a ranked match where this guy hasn't been banned or picked. And that's because, again, all the accumulation of buffs over the past few years have caught up to him. The increased healing on Mending Spirits, the increased health he has, the increased damage he has on Gourd and his primary fire. All of that, plus the recent cooldown change, have made him ridiculous. He got a half a second cooldown reduction on his Mending Spirits recently, which is, what is that, like a sixth of the cooldown or something like that? Is that correct? Mental math is not mathing right now. But that is a big deal. It's a very big deal, because it also stacks with Chronos, of course, to give him a exceptionally low cooldown, and the Mending Spirits is really, really good. You can pair it with Rejuvenate now as well, by the way, and you can give your entire team 30% increased healing on that for the low, low price of only Maldamba having to buy it instead of the rest of the team. That is very strong, and Mending Spirits, of course, has infinite range. It's a hit scan, very consistent, as long as your aim is good, so yeah, that is incredible. The self-sustain with Gourd is incredible. The damage potential he has is incredible. The stunning he has is incredible. The survivability he has with the damage reduction card, with Slither, all that. It is just, he's got everything right now. And it is kind of bittersweet for me because I like to see Maldamba thrive, but also I don't like the way they've done it because they've buffed him so much when he honestly hasn't needed buffs. I've preached for such a long time that this champion is not a champion who needs crazy amounts of buffs. He doesn't need much at all, he just needs the power crept supports to not be so frickin' strong. I made a video about that, I think like a year ago at this point. You can go and watch that for my full analysis on that. But yeah, he is just one of those champions who I guess he's been buffed so much, other champions have been nerfed, and now he's in S tier. I don't know. Am I weird for not liking that? Anyways, moving on, we have Moji. She hasn't been nerfed. I don't know why. She's blatantly overpowered. She has, according to the stats, get ready for it. It's a whopper. She has a 67% win rate. Are you kidding me? I don't remember seeing a win rate that high spat out from the Idobot in my life. What? Or is it Idobot? I never remember. But like, what the heck? Why did this champion not receive a nerf last patch? Or this patch, excuse me. Like, what is going on here? She does gobs of healing. really easily to her entire team as long as they're reasonably grouped up. She has some of the best self-sustain in the game. Magic Barrier basically makes her immortal, especially when she stacks it with Guardian. She has infinite mobility, and she has an Execute ultimate. I mean, what more do you want on support? The only limiting factor is her range, and she is a little bit more on the niche side because not everybody is great at her, and also some maps are more favorable than others. You'd rather play her on Jag Falls than Timbermill, obviously. But there's no doubt the numbers she has and just the power she has right now is way too overblown. And so she is a very easy S tier. And yeah, just ridiculous champion. Now let's move on to the damage champions. I moved Leon down, as I said, so we only have two damage champions here, and they're the same damage champions as the last tier list. Bomb King is in S tier. He is one of the highest performing damage champions in the game. He has excellent mobility, excellent damage, really just consistent across the board as long as you're good at him and you're not playing him on high ping. So, yeah. Bomb King, I think everyone knows this by now. I mean, how many years has he been, like, S or A tier? Like, I don't remember a time when this guy has been bad. And I don't think people really care either. It's like, there's no way a champion goes this long being an S tier if people just, you know, didn't like him. Like, I guess people just like Bomb King being strong. He's just fun. He's just a goofy little guy. I don't know. Very silly. And yeah, then we also have Willow. She got a pretty major nerf. Blast Flower went down by 5% per tier, which is, it adds up. She does 100 less max damage now, I think, with all the stacks on someone. That's pretty huge, but it hasn't impacted her win rate pretty much at all. She's still right up there with Bomb King, and she is the most banned champion in ranked, period, with 18,000 bans at high elo, according to the Itto bot. Again, I don't remember how you're supposed to say that. But yeah, she just has incredible mobility. She has a damage reduction card, which is really what separates her from Drogoz, because otherwise they're two very similar champions, but the damage reduction card gives her an extra layer of survivability that inoculates her from a lot of the traditional counters. And, of course, she also has the Dead Zone, which, you know, that completely nullifies all healing. So she has that over Drogoz too. Really strong champion right now, deserving of an S tier ranking. Then we have the flanks. Again, this is the same as last time, except I have moved Vatu to the very top of S tier. Why did I do that? Well, really, you should be asking the devs, why did you do that? Because the devs gave this dude, who was already an S tier flank, and the premier best flank on keyboard and mouse if you can play him well, they gave this guy a damage buff. Huh? They buffed his worst talent, which, you know, that's fine. But then they retuned his weapon, and they wanted to give it the same through DPS, just consistently throughout the match, right? Every single second, they wanted to make him have the same DPS. But the way they did that is not good, because they ended up just buffing the burst of it. They made the fire rate 1 second, up from 0.9 seconds, so it fires a little bit slower. So to compensate, they buffed the damage of the actual kunai by 90 if you hit all three. But that damage buff, I mean, that DPS is not what's important about Vatu, right? You don't care about his sustained DPS, you care about his burst. And so when you increase the damage of his weapon shots by 90, you break the character by making him too strong. This character is 2-tapping and 3-tapping people left and right now. With the Shadow Bombs combo and just in general comboing his abilities, he is tearing through people like a knife through butter, and he still has some of the best mobility in the game, some of the best survivability in the form of all his sources of damage reduction. He's the same super strong Vatu as always, except with an even more powerful weapon now. So I really hope that the damage buff gets reverted, because it just has made the character ridiculously strong. And that's why he's at the top of S tier. But otherwise, we still have Koga and Skye up here, two premier controller DPS, or controller flanks, excuse me. Koga, obviously, crazy strong, really good DPS when you plug in the aim assist and you just hit all those headshots, and he has excellent survivability to boot in the form of his dashes. People have also found a lot of success using the claws every now and then. They have really good piercing damage, pretty solid burst, they give him a movement speed boost as well. All in all, just an excellent flank, but he is rather tethered to Adrenaline Junkie. Play Adrenaline Junkie, don't play the other two talents, please. And then we have Skye, and yeah, again, really good DPS if you're able to consistently hit those headshots. She has percent-based damage, which is really good at playing or fighting against tanks. And her sort of general niche or strategy, I guess you would call it, is playing smoke and daggers, because that talent is insane right now, giving a 40% movement speed boost to you and your allies, giving them a bunch of extra healing as well, and just kind of following around your off tank, giving them a crazy movement speed boost, supplementing their damage, and playing as a pair, and just going in, getting kills, making space, destroying the enemy team. You pick Skye with Makoa, or Atlas, or Azan, anyone like that, and woof, oh man, it's disgusting. And now let's finally talk about the tanks. So like I said earlier, I moved Torvald down to C tier because he's still probably S or A tier in terms of his strength. You just have to be a bit more careful with when you pick him now, because he's not good in every single situation anymore. Khan still is, however, the most popular tank in the game, and I believe he's still the most banned. I'll have it up on the screen. I'm a bit hazy on if he's the most banned. He might still be the most banned too. Either way, insanely popular and still has an excellent win rate to boot, so just a very easy candidate for S tier. If you want the full breakdown, well, he has the highest single target damage in the game on a tank with Storm of Bullets. He can hit headshots with it, no movement speed penalty. It's just really, really good. Really good self-sustain with his Battle Shout, and that's been buffed because now you can buy Rejuvenate on Khan to increase your own self-healing from that, so that's a funny little thing you can do. And his ultimate is basically a free kill every time. Whether you throw someone off the map or you hold them up for your team to shoot them, it is insanely strong. So, yeah, for high-level ranked, Khan is just phenomenal, and he is a very popular off-tank. But I have moved the two best point tanks in the game, or main tanks, I guess I should continue calling them, up to S tier, because, well, I guess I've been sleeping on them, and their win rates just speak for themselves. They are both the premier champions when it comes to the frontline class. Let me explain why. So, first of all, let's talk about Nyx, because she hasn't been nerfed recently. As a matter of fact, she actually got a few slight buffs. Nyx has everything you could possibly want, except mobility. She has crazy amounts of damage between her punches, her Rift Slash, and then of course the poison, providing percent-based damage to her that also builds up her ultimate charge extremely fast. This percent-based damage also lingers on enemies for an eternity, preventing them from benefiting from healing out of combat if they've been poisoned for a very long time. And also she has crazy amounts of crowd control. So much crowd control. She has a slow on Rift Slash. She has a knockback on Royal Presence, which is easier to use now because now Royal Presence has a timer, so you can just cast the ability right at the end of the timer and you can get the pull on anyone who happens to be nearby. She also has the knock-in on her ultimate, and of course the ultimate also stuns, and then with a talent you can either cripple enemies with Rift Slash, which is insanely valuable, or you can root people with Royal Presence, because, yeah, that's a thing. So, all in all, just a crazy amount of crowd control, and then she has crazy survivability. The shield is very good, and if you stagger your abilities, right, you use your shield, and then you use your Royal Presence, or vice versa, you get a lot of uptime on really powerful survival tools. And the Royal Presence is also an amazing survival tool, because it basically turns all the incoming damage into damage over time, so she takes damage a lot slower during Royal Presence, making it much easier for her healers to heal her, and this is in tandem with her passive that gives her increased healing while she's near the point. This counters Cauterize, which, like I said with Inara, makes her more valuable than other tanks because a lot of other tanks don't have the ability to get this anymore, or if they do, it's much more limited. So this is proportionally much more powerful now in this patch after the Rejuvenate rework. And yeah, oh my gosh. She also can cleanse the Royal Presence damage with her ultimate too, so she can take a lot of damage and then just pop her ultimate, cleanse that. She gets damage reduction during the ult, so it's also harder to build that damage back up again. She can just do pretty much anything she wants, and like I said, the only limiting factor is she doesn't have mobility. If she did have mobility, she'd probably be more broken than releases on. Like, seriously. And this is after a bunch of nerfs too. She got a bunch of cooldown nerfs over the past year. Like, oh boy. The character is insane. I think it's the highest win rate in the tank class right now, I want to say. And yeah, just monster tank. Now, Terminus got a bunch of nerfs recently, and he's still doing excellent. So I want to talk about why that is. Terminus has crazy amounts of sustained damage reduction, just blocking damage outright. He has a really good damage reduction combo in the form of, I believe the card is called Strength of Stone, which gives him damage reduction for each Calamity Blast he has stored up, and he also can use Undying for even more damage reduction. That got nerfed, but it's still pretty good. And he also has the Power Siphon, which is probably the best barrier in the entire game, because you can pop it up whenever you want, and it blocks infinite damage. It blocks everything. Except for a select few things, of course, but it blocks just so much stuff. And it's omnidirectional, so you can just point it at anybody, and you can block damage from any angle. You can completely shroud a teammate in it, or another thing you can do is, let's use an example. Let's say Ruckus is ulting. You can put your Siphon on Ruckus, and basically prevent his entire ult from hitting anybody. So that's another thing you can do. There's so much stuff you can do with the Siphon. And if you run the right build, you can also have very good uptime on it. Now, that's the second thing that's got nerfed about him, but apparently not enough to matter because he's still really, really strong. Now, the rest of his kit is kind of okay. His axe does pretty solid damage, but of course it's melee, so you do have to get up close. His Shatterfall, it slows people. It's vertical mobility, which is always very nice to have on a tank. And his Calamity Blasts, well, if you're playing the speed Terminus build, where you get a 40% movement speed buff for storing your Calamity Blasts, then you're not normally shooting them out. But if you're playing Decimation and you are choosing to play the sort of Calamity Blast shooting build, they do a lot of burst damage, and they're ability damage, so they ignore armor plating. So if you run Decimation and you unload all 5 Calamity Blasts into a target, if they're a squishy champion, there's a chance they just die. Or at the very least, they are on the verge of death. Like, it is a lot of damage. And then his ultimate is also a great space-making tool. It's not without its counterplay. Atlas is very good at countering it, Androxus can counter it. Even Dredge actually can counter it by trapping it with a broadside in his ultimate, so there are ways to counter it. But in general, it's a very good tool for making space, because you can play super aggressive, you can drain your entire Power Siphon, you can use your Shatterfall, you can use all these abilities to just push the enemies back, and then you press ult, you revive with full health, and you get your Power Siphon back, you get your Shatterfall back, so you can do it all again, or you can retreat, or do whatever you want. So all of that makes Terminus extremely strong, and he's a very unique case, because Terminus often doesn't look that impressive on the end scorecard. He doesn't always have crazy amounts of damage, sometimes he doesn't have the craziest amount of kills, and he never has shielding, because sadly Power Siphon doesn't actually count towards the shielding stat, so it doesn't really convey how much value Terminus really gets. A lot of his value is more abstract. It's in the space you make and the stuff you block with your Power Siphon, but there's no doubt his win rate is phenomenal, and he is one of the best tanks in the game. So I have officially stopped sleeping on Terminus. I slept on him in the first tier list of the year. I put him in B tier. Then I was like, okay, I might have been sleeping on this guy, so I put him in A tier. Yeah, I'm just putting him up in S now. He's insane. Maybe I'm late to the party. I am definitely late to the party, but yeah, wowzers, this character is strong. So yeah, that is my S tier ranking for this tier list. And yeah, that's going to do it for today's tier list. So let me know what you think about the tier list in the comment section down below. As always, I love to hear your feedback on what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong. Just make sure to keep it respectful, because like I said at the start, there are always a few people who take it way too seriously and are super toxic. You don't want to be that guy. You just end up embarrassing yourself. Like, it's not a good look. But yeah, let me know what you think about it in the comments. Make sure to subscribe if you're new around here, and also make sure to like the video if you enjoyed. And if you want to support the channel, there are so many ways you can do that. You can follow the Twitch channel, you can check out the VODs channel, you can join the Discord server, and also if you want to directly support me financially to keep me doing what I'm doing full time, you can join the memberships program linked in the right below the video. There's the join button, you click on that, and you can sign up for whatever price you want. You get different perks for different price points, or you can also just go over to the Nexus, nexus.gg/AndrewChicken. You can buy crystals there and support the channel directly in the process, and it's officially affiliated with Mojo, so if you were thinking of buying crystals anyways, you can just do it over there and keep me in business. Yay! It's great, honestly, so I'd appreciate it if you would check that out. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.